them an opportunity to like censor everyone, like extract even more revenue from the chain, 51% attack the chain, and like just do way more nasty stuff. So basically, to the extent that like some amount of MEV is not removable, the PBS has like a better mitigation strategy, because instead of sort of putting it into the same box where you just like you risk validator centralizing, you put it into this other thing where that thing being centralized and unfair is less harmful. And once again, like this is not yet that part of that part of the presentation, but later on in the presentation, like I will talk about some ways of potentially kind of reducing the harm of like someone dominating the MEV market even more. And like you could even, I guess this is a bit of a spoiler, you could even have design a thing that wins the MEV market where that thing itself is like some kind of decentralized system. So, okay, this is getting ahead of ourselves, but section 1 of 3 done. So happy to take questions.
Uri had wanted to speak, so
okay.
Uri, you got like. On now.
Yeah. I'll do it super quick. I think Vitalik. Sorry, the echo is driving crazy. I think everybody agrees that there is an advantage to explicit auction to avoid all sorts of like nasty stuff around it. But if you look at the PBS on the table, I'm actually concerned about loss of the mempool. There's no longer peer-to-peer propagation of transaction, at least not to DeFi transactions, because if they propagate this way, they get screwed. So all the transaction will be sent directly either to Bloxroute or Blocknative or Flashbots, Block Builder. And I just wonder if the harm is bigger than the benefit. I don't know that it is, but that's a concern from my perspective.
Even if Prism is more dangerous in some absolute sense, like this, if Prism has a low market share, there's still kind of incentives, like, or as long as its failures are kind of not correlated, then there's an incentive to kind of push toward it. Or another example might be if lots of people are staking on AWS, then like you have an incentive to not stake on AWS. And even if you want to stake in some other cloud, like you would have an incentive to just choose a different cloud provider just because, right? So, or another one is like if there's lots of staking in China, then like it's in your interest to instead stake in India or whatever. So the goal is to try to kind of encourage people to also decentralize on all of these different levels as well.
So continue.
Yay. Okay. What kind of PBS? This is the next topic. Well, right. So proposer builder separation, right, is this idea of separating out what we call the block proposer, which is the validator that happens to be randomly chosen to be the one who kind of does the finishing step of the block proposal process, from the block builder, where the block builder is the entity that kind of actually constructs the block and chooses transaction by transaction. So the way that PBS is generally structured is kind of it's generally all the same, right? So step 1, each block builder makes a bid for the next lot. So they say, hey, I can make a block for the next lot, and I'm willing to pay 0.22 ETH for that privilege. Someone else might say, hey, I'm willing to make a block for the next lot, and I'm willing to pay 0.23 ETH for that privilege. And so you have like a bunch of these bids floating around, and the block proposer's job is just a very easy one. They just choose the bid that has the highest number on it, right? The block builder, once the proposer kind of chooses, then or only the winning builder publishes the corresponding block. So 3-step game, right? Step 1 bid, step 2 accept, step 3 publish. But as we'll see, there's lots of different ways to fill in the details of this game. So just as to kind of motivate why this is hard, here's 2 of the key properties that we want to preserve. So one property that we want to preserve is we want to make sure that the builder cannot cheat proposers, right? So the builder can't, like, we do not want the builder to be able to, refuse to publish their block and deny the proposer their revenue, right? So this would be one reason why just like a very simple mechanism where, it's like step one, people publish their bids. Step two, the proposer accepts, and the proposer publishes the block header, and then step three, the block builder like releases the block body, and that's it. Like this is why that kind of mechanism is not sufficient, right? Because in like that kind of very simple mechanism, the block builder could choose to not publish the block, and when they don't publish the block, then they basically deny the block proposer the ability to get the revenue. And there's a lot of different reasons why they might want to do that. For example, they might be colluding with the next proposer and they want to get that MEV in the next slot instead. So it's generally not something we want to allow. Right? So that's one property. Another property is we don't want the proposer to be able to cheat builders. So this is more subtle because there's like more subtle kinds of cheating going on. But one simple example is like we don't want the proposer to be able to look at the builder's block and do what we call like strategy stealing, right? So like let's say the builder's block contains a transaction that takes Justin Sun's CDP and grabs $100 million from it because it can be liquidated. We don't want the block proposer to be able to like basically run their own automated algorithm agreement, right? So this is like one straw man that kind of satisfies option one, but does not satisfy, or satisfies criterion one, but does not satisfy criterion two is, well, what if we require the bids to just contain full block bodies? There's actually two reasons why that doesn't work. One reason is that it just makes the whole mempool very clogged, because you could have potentially hundreds of like full bodies floating around. And the other reason is because it's vulnerable to strategy stealing, right? So like step one, publish bids. Step two, accept bids. Step three, publish a full body or it doesn't work. And step one, publish full blocks. And step two, proposer accepts a full block also doesn't work. So you have to be more sophisticated. So, this is the kind of approximate design of the Flashbots MEV Boost, which is the thing that the Flashbots team is helpfully working on. And it is a kind of federated, semi-trustless, but semi-trusted solution to the PBS problem that does not rely on any changes to the Ethereum protocol, but that does rely on this trusted actor in the middle that we call a relayer. So the way that this works is basically that the builder first sends their payload, which means sends their full block body to a relayer. Then the relayer sends their just the block header to the proposer. This is a header. It also contains a bid, right? So it sends the header and the bid to the proposer. The proposer chooses the highest bid. They send their proposal, which is like the block header of their block that includes kind of the hashes of what the builder said that they would include, and it includes the proposer's signature. And then once the relayer sees this, then the relayer publishes the full body, right? Yes.
Right now in the current setup, the relayer sends the execution payload back to the proposer, and the proposer still publishes it, but the relayer could also broadcast it.
Right. Yes. So the relayer needs the ability to broadcast that because we don't want the proposer to be able to like cheat the builder. But yes, that's it's a good optimization.
What is the difference between the builder and the relayer? Right? Like it's the same entity.
Can I? Sorry.
Oh, okay.
The builder and the relayer can be the same entity,
okay.
But also a relayer.
So the builder and the relayer can be the same entity, and like in some cases they will be, but the idea is that like this allows people to basically just run open source relayers that accept anyone. So like if the the TUVine decide that they wants to leverage their reputation as a nice trusted actor, and they decide they just want to be a relayer, then the process of them doing that would just require them to just like run a computer and have a couple of RPC endpoints and just maintain a node, right? So if they don't need to do sophisticated building themselves, but and then what that allows you to do is that allows, some, let's say, for example, some random person from China who, let's say people in Europe don't trust and they've never heard of, and they've never heard of any of the people that he claims as references. And so he can basically just create block bodies and go through this kind of this real layer, and that way you kind of overcome the trust gap, right? Because the proposers don't have to kind of trust this builder that they've never heard of, but the builder also has this ability to participate despite kind of not being plugged into this global kind of trust graph, right? And I think in general, like the goal here is that we don't, in order to prevent centralization of validators, right? Remember, proposers here are just like Ethereum validators. What we also do not want to require the validators to have to like frequently update their configs, right? And we expect like builders to come in frequently. We expect there to be lots of builders. And it would be annoying if proposers had to like constantly update their trust lists. And so if you just have like a real layer in the middle where that real layer is like, there's a specific set of real layers, and when the proposer just like starts up, they can include like a list of trusted real layers into their config once. Then the builders then the builders could use any one of those real layers, and kind of things will be more stable for the proposer.
Can you maybe explain again, or I didn't get it, like how the real layer actually solves the two queries?
Yes. Okay. So so going back to the two problems, right? So the reason why the builder can't cheat the proposer in this model, right, is that cheating the proposer basically means refusing to publish, right? But in order for the real layer to be willing to send the bid to the proposer, the real layer has to have the full body. And so if the proposer like accepts a bid, then the proposer knows that the block corresponding to the bid is in the hands of the real layer. And so the real layer, like if they want to, they can publish, or if they want to, they can send to the proposer, and the proposer can publish.
But then again, the proposal shouldn't use the Ethermine relay or whatever.
Right.
Something, right? So
I mean, I think the proposer's like the intended design is that like when you set up an Ethereum validator, like as part of your config, you would have like a list of real layers that you're willing to trust. You just like make that list once, and you're willing to trust them.
The idea is that there are much more relays than right now.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. The ideal is that like I personally want there to just be several dozen nonprofits around the world running a real layer, and like it should be this.
The thing is that running a relay is profitable. There are no incentives to run one.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason why there's only 2.
Right, that's true. I mean, personally, I think like Flashbots should just give grants to do this, or like maybe the Ethereum Foundation should give grants to do this. I mean, if no one else wants to, even I could give grants for if anyone wants to run a real layer. But yeah, like it is. I mean, remember, MEV Boost is like not perfect, and it does rely on like some social incentives, and it's clunky in that way. So it is a stopgap, but while we have the stopgap, like I think we should try to make it work as well as we can.
I also see it working in a non-profit manner, and it's infrastructure intensive because you have to accept block submissions by the builders, you have to verify them, simulate them, make sure that it's kind of it opens a few venues for spamming and DOSing. Like it's a little bit tricky infrastructure to run. It's not.
Yeah, it's quite hard to run. It's expensive, and there are no incentives to run it. So, and requires the knowledge to do so.
I feel like there's a lot that can be done to make it cheaper. I mean, like what's not even being done, like this, the whole spam thing. Like you could require builders to like actually register on chain somehow. So like in general, I think we should be trying to sort of leverage the kind of the sophistication of builders to try to reduce the level of sophistication required on the real layer side, ideally. There are kind of SGX-based tricks that could reduce the amount of trust needed in the real layer, but like we'll also talk about that later. But this is kind of the approach that doesn't require protocol changes, and it's basic, but it requires this extra trust assumption, and like it requires this extra kind of community work to manage the trust assumption, but like it is what we have for now. So in protocol PBS, right? So there's this is the, I think, more likely candidate for in protocol PBS. And the basic idea is like very simple and dumb. It's a 2-slot system, right? Basically, in even numbered slots, you just have a system where the block proposer chooses the bid, and then in odd numbered slots, essentially whoever won the bid is the proposer, and they propose what the block is. Very simple. So that's the benefit of this kind of approach is like you essentially the chain becomes able to detect kind of like discriminate between 3 scenarios, right? Like one scenario is that the proposer was missing. The second scenario is that the proposer was there, but the builder is missing, and then the third scenario is that the proposer is there and the builder is there, right? So the reason why the builder can't cheat the proposer is because if the proposer is there but the builder is missing, then the fact that the builder is missing gets recorded by attesters in consensus, and so the once that happens, like the consensus rules can basically say, well, whoever won the auction has to pay the bid anyway, despite the fact because the fact that they did not publish is their own fault, and so the proposer still gets the exact same revenue they would have otherwise gotten, right? And
Sorry, the proposer can just say I didn't get it.
No, so right, so the proposer can refuse to can disappear over here, right? Right, like the
no, like if the proposer says that the builder didn't send the block.
Oh, I see. No, sorry, it's not the proposer's job to check to check whether or not the block was published. There's like an entire committee of attestation, so it's like all the validators do it. Okay. And then the proposer can't cheat the builder because, well, the blocks are only published after the auction is won, and in fact, the builder only publishes the block after there's a proposal and even after there's a round of attestations on the proposal. So even if the proposer kind of equivocates and lets themselves get slashed, even then you actually get like they can't kind of grab the MEV and switch over who the or which block is going to get proposed, which is like a really nice and strong property, right? So it's a very robust system. The main weakness of it is that the slot time, instead of being like 12 seconds, has to be like potentially about like almost double. Now you can avoid it being exactly double because you can basically say that the number of people attesting here can be much smaller than the number of people being attesting here. So you could say instead of 12 seconds, the slot time is 20 seconds, but it's still like kind of not very nice, right? The delay comes from so the reason why we have to have a slot time is because like you need to have we need to have a fairly conservative assumption on networking delay, and like basically so that we can prove that as long as actual latency is within the networking delay, the whole chain kind of converges and everything is safe. And the reason why the kind of like the time between blocks that will double here is because you need 2 slots instead of 1 to accept every block. So 1-slot PBS is this kind of alternative design that I came up with, and that hasn't seen too much enthusiasm, and possibly it hasn't seen too much enthusiasm for good reason, but like I figure it's worth mentioning for completeness. The basic idea is like the Ethereum chain acts as a decentralized relayer, or basically attesters act as a decentralized relayer, right? So the goal, basically take MEV boost, kick out the relayer, and you replace it with like a threshold thing consists of like 128 random attesters. So step 1, builder sends the header, and they split, encrypt, and send the different chunks of the payload. So basically they secret share the payload, right? They take this, so the payload is like the full block body. They take that body, split it up into 100 pieces, use erasure coding to extend that to 200 pieces, and erasure coding basically means that like you can take any 100 of those 200 pieces to reconstruct the original block, and then you separately encrypt each of those pieces to a different committee member, and then each committee member tries to decrypt, and if the thing that they decrypted matches the commitment, so you would use like some polynomial commitment here to kind of because polynomial commitments can kind of verify that even the erasure coding is done correctly. So if they see that they have the correct chunk, then they send a signature, and then if you have enough signatures from the committee, then the proposer would receive that bid, and then the proposer would take the best bid, they send the proposal, and then when the committee sees the proposal, they would kind of decrypt the chunks and they would broadcast, right? So it's like the same thing as MEV Boost, except it's like decentralized MEV Boost, where instead of having like the function of the relayer is done by this kind of like basically threshold cryptography, but it's kind of done in a decentralized way by some randomly selected set of validators. The reasons to be scared of this kind of model are, I think, like one is that it just adds kind of more cryptographic assumptions. And another, and this is like the reason why I personally have generally been kind of skeptical of adding threshold encryption like things into Ethereum, right? Which like other chains are sort of more aggressive on this, right? So like Polkadot, as I remember, is kind of proud of having sort of in protocol secret sharing. The reason why I'm scared of this is basically because 51% attacks like totally can happen, right? And 51% attacks against a threshold encryption are much worse than 51% attacks against consensus because they're invisible, right? Like if 51% of the validators collude to censor people or to do like some like attack where they revert the chain and revert finalized blocks, that's something that the community can detect, the community can pick up on it. Either they get slashed or the community does some soft fork where they get penalized and they lose a big part of their deposits. But if, on the other hand, 51% of stakers quietly accept a bribe to kind of give their, kind of feed their the decrypted shares to the NSA, then the NSA is going to be able to front run everyone, and like no one's going to see that this is happening. So that's the reason why I think in general, like people are scared of that, like, or at least like I'm scared of relying too much on threshold cryptography, and a lot of other people are, because like you can 51% attack it silently. So those are kind of the three different approaches. None of them are perfect. Creating something that's even better is an open research problem. So you know, if you want to work on this, there is you know, there is a research community that would love to see the answer. If you create and publish something amazing, then I hear that publishing amazing ideas is often a path to getting hired by the Ethereum Foundation. But yeah, this is a you know, open fun challenge. So that's one of the rabbit holes that we can go down on in the question of like what kind of PBS we should have, right? Like basically it's like different technical approaches to trying to solve the problem of like making sure proposers can't cheat builders and making sure builders can't cheat proposers, right? And the reason why I think it's important to kind of make sure that both sides can't cheat the other is because once one of the sides can cheat the other, then the other side has an incentive to rely on reputation, and reputation is much easier to have if you're like a big and centralized actor, and so it starts creating centralization pressure, right? Like I think we want to create a world where any random guy with 32 ETH can be a competitive staker, and any random person with some cool algorithm comes out of some random village in China can be an amazing builder, even if like you know nobody here and you know you're our research. Another dimension of research is do builders have to pre-commit to block contents? So this is the issue here, right? Like basically the way that some of these existing designs are built. So basically the way that all three of these are, I think, conceived is that the bids contain the block hash, right? So the bid basically says, I want to produce a block, and the block has this particular hash. So they're committing to the contents of the block, and I'm willing to pay 0.22 ETH if you let me include this block. So that's one approach. Another approach is you might say, if you give me full freedom to create the next block, then I'm willing to pay 0.22 ETH for that privilege. So it's a very subtle difference between these two models, I think one of the practical consequences of this difference is that basically the question is like what information the MEV collected is based off of, right? So if I think this diagram here is really helpful, right? Like basically, if you require the bids to publish their bids over here, where those bids include block hashes, then the time the time that they have to figure out what to include is over here, right? And the information that they have that they can work off of is going to be over here. And so the kind of price discrepancies that they can arbitrage off of are going to be like basically the price discrepancy between over here and over here, right? But on the other hand, if you let builders just have free reign to choose what they build, then they could actually they would be able to choose their block contents over here. And so they would be able to kind of choose MEV based on like anything that happens over here, based on any kind of price discrepancies that happen over here, based on any transactions that get published over here, right? So it's like, in both cases, you have a 2-slot window of like stuff you can extract MEV off of, but in one case, the window kind of ends over here, and in the other case, the window ends over here, right? So this does have some pretty practical consequences. One of the practical consequences is that if builders have to pre-commit to block contents, then builder profits become deterministic and guaranteed, right? Because the builder's bid is like a number and it's part of the bid, and the profit that the builder can get is also going to be from the block contents, where the block contents are also going to be committed, right? And so the builder knows like, hey, I'm bidding 0.22, and this block is going to be able to give me 0.223, and so I'm going to get a profit of 0.003, right? Now, this is not entirely true, because if the MEV depends on, like, say, like buying arbitraging on Binance, then like they would have to be able, their kind of complete cycle would actually depend on being able to actually go on Binance as soon as the block is confirmed to make the trades, and like maybe prices will move a little bit between when they make their bid and when they're going to be when they'll be sure whether or not they won. So it's not entirely deterministic, but it's like pretty deterministic. Right? But on the other hand, if you're just auctioning off slots and you're saying, you have I pay 0.22 ETH in exchange for kind of free reign in this figuring out what happens in the slot, then you only have half the transactions and half the kind of price information that you need, right? Because basically what's going on is that you're making your bid over here, and the previous block was made over here, and when you're making the previous block was made over here, and so you're making your bid based on transactions that have happened over here, based on price movements that have happened over here, but you also know that when you actually make your block, there's going to be more price movements that will happen, there's going to be more transactions that will come in, right? So being a builder becomes a more probabilistic thing, it becomes like a thing that requires more sophisticated algorithms, it becomes like more professionalized in a lot of ways, and so it does become kind of more capital intensive and potentially more sophisticated in economies of scale. But there are also benefits to giving block builders free reign to that depends on being the builder, say both on Ethereum and on Optimism, then you could, or on both on Ethereum and on like Solana, for example, then you could do something clever that basically says, I am going to compete to be the block producer both on this side and on this side, and knowing that like I will be, or if I win, then I will be able to kind of choose the block contents based on the fact that I won on both sides. So if you don't allow this, then it becomes harder to do this, right? Like if you don't allow people to like builders to have free reign, then this becomes harder to do, right? Because like you have to pre-commit to the contents before you know whether or not you've won, and so you have to pre-commit to the contents before you know whether or not you've won on both sides, and so you can't really do cross-domain stuff. And so like there's still a benefit to being a proposer and to being in this kind of activist proposer that does sophisticated stuff, right? So like in this way, if to the extent that cross-domain MEV is a big deal, then builders having free reign is more decentralizing. Another fun one is that winning builders could offer pre-confirmation services, right? So like what you could do is you could say, I send a transaction where that transaction has a priority fee of like, let's say 2 GLE, but then I also add on top another priority fee that says, if you the builder responds to me within 500 milliseconds with a cryptographically enforceable promise that you will include this transaction, then I'm willing to pay an extra 5 GLE. And like obviously this promise, like it can't be enforced by the blockchain itself because the blockchain's kind of tick time is 12 seconds, and we're talking about guarantees in 500 milliseconds. But you could imagine like a system based on Chainlink that does this, right? And if Chainlink is like good enough and it works like well enough, that, or you could even run it on Solana, like just like you could imagine a trusted time-stamping actor. Like you could imagine something that's like has reasonable enough assumptions that works. And in this way, like basically transactors could pay extra for this kind of extra privilege of getting really fast confirmations. And this would be this kind of really nice backdoor way by which Ethereum users could basically get their transactions confirmed within 400 milliseconds. And, like Ethereum would sort of in some ways be competitive with fast chains, which I think is kind of cool. Okay. How to improve PBS, right? So this is the section where I talk about some downsides, or like some kind of subtleties of how PBS works today, and some ways to improve it. Anyway, is this my water? Mine. Okay. Can I have a water? I just want to like take a water break before I get back to blabbing.
Sorry, I was quite trying to be mindful of our audience. They were kicked out by Alpha Software of Spatial a couple of times, and there were a few fun incidents.
Mitkohlensäure.
Yeah. This is
yeah.
Oh, you don't want it. Okay.
Wait, this one is also Mit. Fine.
Oh, I think this is
No, it's Can you just like dump more water into my tea and like I don't care if it's cold. I just
well, we give everyone a
yeah.
breath before we go
Okay.
into.
Oh, amazing. Yes, the Ohne, my favorite word in the German language.
But I've always joked that like, liebe dich. I love you.
Yeah.
Ich liebe dich.
Yeah. The committee totally can collude with the proposer. The argument is that like this is not as big of a risk because the committee is randomly sampled, and so you need like 51% of the validators to be involved to like properly pull that off. But like as I said, right, like the argument against is like well, actually 51% of people can and will collude if they can do it silently without, and if there's like we're talking about like 5 or 10 pools and they know they're not going to get caught. So it's a good argument against anything threshold based.
Random selection.
Like some like ran down in the previous slot.
Most of people's access to stuff.
Interesting. That could happen. I guess Binance is going to be better at arbing Binance than anyone else. Now, there are. I will talk about alternative market, like kind of like what some like other possibilities are for who ends up winning the builder market. So this is actually part of the third section. So this is basically the third section is like basically it's all about mitigating builder centralization, right? So this is like the section that I think a lot of people have been waiting for.
we got a request for anyone who asks questions in this room to be loud. There has been, I think, like 7 or 10 people pop up in the space and each trying to, they've been having a lot of fun, although we muted all of them. So when they're trying to speak, I think I figure out what's the problem, but there's also a lot of confounding problem with spatial software. We'll deal with that after this presentation.
Oh, by the way, I appreciate the time on the computer being UTC time. Wang Chuan would approve.
Oh, yes. Certainly.
Okay.
The miners.
Yeah, so I guess, so talking a bit about censorship in PBS, right? So censoring transactions in PBS is still expensive, right? And this is the kind of argument about why, right? Like basically, if there is one transaction that a winning builder, and even let's say a hypothetical builder that's like so good that they're winning every slot, wants to censor, and that transaction has a priority fee of X, then the winning builder like basically has to pay X in every single slot that they censor, right? So the griefing factor, if you're censoring, is like very against the censor. Like the censor has to pay like potentially hundreds or thousands of times X if they want to like really censor the transaction properly, right? And the reason why is like basically that the non-censoring builders, right? Like if the transaction has a fee of P, they would be able to, without the transaction, they'd be able to win M, or they'd be able to bid M. And with that transaction, they'd be able to bid M plus P. And the attacker has like some advantage that's M plus A, right? Where this is A is like the advantage between the attacker and like, let's say the best honest builder that's not censoring. A could be less than P, A could also be greater than P. It's the math actually works out to be the same in all cases, right? So if the A is less than P, then it's because the attacker has this constraint that they have to censor, then the attacker just loses because they get outbid by the non-censoring builders, right? Or potentially the attacker has to lose money. Like basically the attacker has to kind of go over here and bid higher. And so instead of the attacker bidding like a bit higher than M and getting A, the attacker has to bid a bit higher than M plus P, and they lose P minus A, right? So instead of a winning A, the attacker loses P minus A, so the attacker kind of loses P. And this basically happens kind of every single slot that during which they keep trying to block this transaction. Now, if A is greater than P, then basically instead of the attacker being able to bid a little bit higher than M, the attacker has to bid a little bit higher than M plus P. And if A is greater than P, then like the attacker is still making a profit, but every slot they're going to make a profit that's like only A minus P instead of being A, right? So it's like if I send a transaction whose priority fee is like even 5 cents, and then if you censor my transaction, then you have to just keep on paying 5 cents every single slot. And if you want to censor it forever, you have to keep paying 5 cents a slot forever. So the economics of censoring are still not very good for a relayer that wants to censor, but I think you can make a strong case that like this is still not good enough, right? So like for example, if you only care about censoring someone for 20 minutes because like say you want to do something bad to them in a DeFi platform, or you have an on-chain vote and you want to prevent them from voting and the vote only lasts 20 minutes or whatever, then there's a lot of applications where delaying people by 20 minutes is like still very harmful, right? And 20 minutes is 100 slots, so like it's still a griefing factor of 100 to 1, but like there's a lot of cases where you could imagine people being willing to pay 100 to 1 griefing factor, right? Like I don't know, like the U.S. government would totally be willing to pay 100 to 1 griefing factors against Edward Snowden, for example, right? So basically the question is like, can we get censorship resistance to be kind of back to something closer to the level where it is today, right? And the reason why censorship resistance is like very good today is because today, if you want to censor someone, you have to not only kind of outbid them in every block, but you also have to create full blocks, like double full blocks, where so instead of 15 million gas, like 30 million gas, where all of those transactions are full of like basically have priority fees that go above what you're willing to pay, and like and then you have to just kind of keep on letting the base fee go up and like go up to the point where like whatever amount that you're willing to pay for your transaction, the attacker has to be willing to pay that fee times 15 million gas every block. So it's the griefing ratio is like, it's not even like 1-to-1 times the number of blocks. It's like the number of blocks times the size of a block divided by the size of your transaction. So to delay someone by 20 minutes, instead of the griefing factor being 100-to-1, it's like 10,000-to-1, right? So that's kind of the by the way, in case you missed it, like griefing factor is like, this is a term that I think people in crypto sometimes use. Like the griefing factor is X when in order to force someone else to lose $1, you have to lose X dollars, right? So like if in this case, like the reason why we're talking in terms of like forcing people to lose money is because the assumption is like like people can always people who are being censored can always raise their fees, and so the question is like, well, how much does the censor have to lose in order to kind of push the amount that the victim has to pay to a level higher than what they can afford, right? So status quo, the griefing factor is like 10,000-to-1. Like if I have a transaction and I'm willing to pay $5 to get it included, you have to pay like $50,000 to censor it for 20 minutes. But with PBS, like it does decrease to about 500-to-1. And the argument is like, this is going to happen anyway, because if PBS didn't exist, then the validators would eventually start to have their own infrastructure, and that infrastructure itself could like start accepting bribes to not include transactions, right? So it like basically censorship is kind of decreasing, or the griefing factor decreasing is an equilibrium to some extent, but we want to try to fix it, right? So we have two ideas for trying to fix this. One of them is this concept of secondary blocks, where you basically have like many block bodies that the proposer accepts in parallel. So instead of having one auction per slot, imagine like 20 different auctions per slot. And normally the first auction would be the only one that like really has anything non-empty. But if transactions are being censored, then other people will make secondary blocks where they offer to include that transaction. And those, like if you want to censor someone, you basically have to outbid not just the primary auction, but you would also have to outbid all of the secondary auctions. So this is one of the ideas.
You have, Uri would like to counter you.
Okay.
So, Uri, you're on.
Okay.
Oh, no music. Amazing. Can you speak?
Yeah.
Can someone speak? Can someone speak? Can someone speak? He is speaking, but we can't hear him. Uri, unfortunately, you may have to rejoin. This happens with Spatial, where individuals somehow get randomly muted without you doing anything. You may need to quit and rejoin.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yay! Okay. Also, no music. Perfect.
Okay. Still strong echo. Okay. Vitalik, sorry for always being the bad guy and countering, but isn't your analysis of ignoring ETH 1559 and basically the tip that a builder would make is significantly smaller than the cost of his own transactions? So basically, all builders are somewhat incentivized to ignore all non-DeFi transactions, push the base fee down, so their own bundles, either their own bundles are cheaper or other people bundles are more profitable.
Right. I mean, this gets into like the EIP 1559 debate. I mean, I would say no, because like EIP 1559 in general has this property that like unless close to 50% of participants validators are participating in a collusion to make empty blocks, then like they're not going to decrease the base fee at all, right? Like it's not even like a slight curve, it's like flat until some point. And the reason why is because like if a transaction does not get included in block N, it'll just get included in block N plus 1, right? And so the long run effect on the equilibrium base fee is just going to be exactly the same. So right, yeah. So like basically, yes, censoring isn't like, and then the other thing is like if you censor a transaction for a really long time, then like that would reduce the base fee, but then that also kind of changes the economic equilibrium, and then it makes it worth it for other people for like some other person to transact, right? Because there's kind of this long run law that like the target is going to be 15 million gas, right? Because like the base fee decreases until blocks have 15 million gas on average. And so if you're censoring, then you are right. Well, okay, no, sorry, the equilibrium, no, right, it does push down the base fee by a bit, but that's not going to increase priority fees, right? Like the thing that could increase priority fees is obviously if like builders start all censoring everyone that doesn't pay a really high priority fee. But then if they're just censoring for economic reasons, then it's like just because the economics of censorship are so unfavorable, like you would just need one honest builder to be able to outcompete them, I think.
So just to point out, it's not to get the tip, right? It's in order to make their base fee cheaper. So you're not trying to push others to pay a higher fee. You just make your own bundles more profitable, and you know all the other block builders.
Wait, but how does making the base fee cheaper make your own bundles more profitable? Like, I guess it does a little bit for one block because of like the supply curve, but it's not like if the base fee goes down by 5 gwei, like you can earn the 5 gwei, right? Like
no, but if every bundle of gas, so I include a transaction which costs $10, and if I can push the base fee down, it will cost me $5. So the bundle is more profitable.
Well, no, because like validators are not going to increase their priority fees just because the base fee went down. Right, it's like if the base, like basically your revenue as a block builder is dependent on what the priority fees are, and priority fees are just priority fees. Like they're not going to increase just because the base fee decreases.
No, you're missing the point. My point is not tips are going. Priority fee is not going to go up, but there's a base fee in each bundle of having a transaction. Capturing arbitrage or front running, etc., and that would be cheaper. So the bundles would be more profitable.
But why would it be? Like the base fee is just something that goes straight from transactors, like straight into the Ethereum pool. Like how does it make the bundle more profitable? Right, but like that would be a little bit, right? It's like if the base.
But in the limit, I mean, like.
Yeah, right. It's like because like arbitrages are going to have like a very fat tail. It's like the first 5 arbitrages you make is like 99% of your arbitrage.
If somebody at the room could make the argument better, the communication is a bit hard. But basically, it's not about the revenue, it's about the cost.
Yeah, but I think the point
producing bundles become cheaper.
The margin effect from including a few more arbitrages is so small that it doesn't.
Right, like I don't think it's even, well, the other thing is I don't think it's philosophically correct to even like think of the base fee as being costs that you as a bundler pay. It's just like it's costs that transactors pay.
But
like
the one creating the bundle will create a front running or a back running transaction.
Right. Okay. So the cost of, right, so the cost of doing front running and back running decreases, but I think, but like in general, the front running operations, like they're, yeah, I think like, I guess like it depends on like what the market structure actually looks like, but I definitely have this instinct that like there's a power law, and if you reduce the cost of a front run by like 10%, like you're not going to get 10% more front running revenue, like you might get 1 or 2%. Right.
Yes, but you'll make a lot more money than tips. Tips are nothing. Tips are nothing.
No, but the difference between the front runs that you can make at a base fee of 50 gwei versus the front runs that you can make at a base fee of 45 gwei is also nothing.
It's 5 times more than the transaction. If the tip is 1 gwei, and you can
right.
cut down
okay,
the
so
cost
from
significantly.
Sure. Okay, you can you can get an extra 5 gwei of revenue from front runs, but like front runs are only a small portion of block contents as well, right? Like you're not going to have a block full of like 5 million gas of front runs.
Right. So basically, it's a debate between including transaction with 1 gwei tip, or ignoring them for a day, pushing the base fee down, and then go back to consensus with, the equilibrium.
So if you ignore 1 single transaction for a day, the impact on the base fee is going to be negligible, but the amount like you would have to pay like that base fee over the course of that entire day.
I'll try to make a better argument on E3 search on this.
Okay. Okay. Then I'll move on to idea 2 for now. So idea 1, right? Basically secondary blocks. So you have like multiple auctions in parallel. So as a sensor, you have to like outbid on all of them. So like I think the argument is like whatever your opinions are on how viable it is to win the auction, or how viable it is for a sensor to outbid. Like if there's 8 parallel secondary auctions, it increases by a factor of 8.
So the sensor submit marginally lower secondary blocks.
Well, they would have to submit a secondary, like to censor 1 transaction, they would have to submit a secondary block that loses money, that like has a higher bid on all of the channels, right? So like in order to bid, like if the transaction pays X to censor, you have to do like 8X plus 1. Okay, so idea 2 is what we call censorship resistance lists, or CR lists. So the idea here is that proposers create lists of transactions that they've seen with a rule that the builder has to include those transactions unless the block is too full to include them, right? So this is like, actually, this gets back to the question of like, well, is PBS going to just destroy the mempool? This is basically saying, well, no, we're actually going to keep the mempool, and we're even going to give people a reason to use the mempool, basically because if you send a transaction, then as soon as a proposer sees it and they include it in a CR list, then like that transaction has to get included in the next block, right? So there's even this added incentive to use the mempool to send things. So very simple proposal, right? Like basically, if the proposer, like the proposer just has a list of transactions that they've seen, and the list doesn't even have to be limited; it can be very big, and the proposer kind of publishes this list, and and the bids have to reference that list, and so the blocks have to include all. Not necessarily, like either include all of the transactions or include some of those transactions and not have enough space to include any more of them, right? So in the long term, like basically that means that like either the CR list gets included in 1 slot, or blocks are like double full until the CR list does all get included. So this is just leveraging altruistic proposers, right? Like even if 10% of proposers are altruistic and they have non-empty CR lists, then a transaction is going to get included, within 10 slots. Like mean, potentially you could even do some kind of really mean stuff and like extend it, and you could have like weird logic where attesters are only willing to attest to proposals if that proposal has a big enough CR list. So you could even expand it further if you want to, but like that's just the general design, right? So basically, I mean, it allows proposers to kind of be altruistic and be censorship resistance backstops if they want to. But even if they do that, like those proposers would still be able to plug into the PBS market, and they would still be able to get the highest revenue from any honest builder.
Like why don't like think this idea to the extreme and like mandate that every transaction is in the secret file has to be in a CR list?
Well, you can't mandate that like every transaction has to be in the CR list, because you don't have network-wide agreements on what every transaction is. Like you could have transactions that are like published close to the deadline, and you could have sort of lack of consensus about whether or not they were published early enough to be eligible.
Right, but this is like the same problem you now have with the smaller CR lists as well. Like,
well, no, because in this case, the proposer just like is kind of like a bottleneck that kind of like the proposer chooses what the list is, and so guarantees that everyone sees them.
Yeah, and why not just let the proposer do the same thing, but force the builders to only pick things from the CR list?
Oh, I see. I mean, if he wants to, you could do that. I think, the reason not to do that is because like we want the builders to be able to kind of do specialized things that require adding their own transactions. So like you want builders to be able to like, front run Uniswap, for example, right? Which requires the builders to add their own transaction, because if the builders can't do that, then then you're just bringing back the incentive to be a proposer that's running these like fancy algorithms yourself.
What do you see the downsides of the CR lists?
Yeah, I think the downsides are, I mean, one is that it works to the extent that it relies on honesty, right? So like if only 10% of proposers are honest, then you have to wait 10 slots, which is not optimal. Maybe there's ways to make it better. There's actually a much more subtle downside, which is there are actually benefits to removing the concept of like an in-protocol mempool. Basically, the downsides have to do with like account abstraction and stuff like ERC-4337, like basically people being able to use smart contracts as wallets. That becomes something that's like very easy to do if you don't have like a protocol level concept of like a transaction, meaning a user operation, because you could just create layer 2 mempools that kind of work with different kinds of smart contract wallets. And if you have a censorship resistance design that's based on secondary blocks, then it just like it doesn't have to be aware of transactions. It can just like work with whatever. But if you have censorship resistance lists, then CR lists have to be aware of what the concept of a transaction is. Like they have to be aware of this concept of like an objective user intent. And so in order to do account abstraction, in order to make like ERC-4337 fit into this model, you have to do a bit of extra work. You have to maybe even enshrine, like not all of ERC-4337, but like some parts of it. So that's a disadvantage. That's an advantage of like literally getting rid of the mempool and getting rid of Ethereum being aware of transactions. So like if you think that is a net good, then like you basically already think, or like if you think that public mempool is continuing to exist as a net good, then like I think you already think that advantage or that disadvantage is outweighed by the other advantages, and CR lists are probably better. Okay. So those are just like some ideas for improving censorship resistance and for kind of keeping up an incentive to have and continue to use a public mempool. So next, we can talk about internally decentralized builders, right? So the hope here, and I think this is a hope that's like strongly felt by like even like a lot of Flashbots people, is that you could the builder that wins the market might even itself be a builder that is internally decentralized. And there are unique advantages that that internally decentralized builders have, right? So the dream is basically that you have builders that decentralize internally, where the builder is a system that accepts bundles from an open market of actors that are called searchers. So searchers submit bundles. Bundles are sets of transactions, and those bundles, like a bundle could be one transaction, a bundle could be an entire block, a bundle could be a collection of transactions, a bundle could be a collection of transactions plus the requirement that that bundle appears first, right? So you could have like many different kinds of bundles. And the job of the builder is to take the bundles provided by searchers, take the ones that pay the highest fee, kind of arrange them in order, and just publish that as a just as a block body, right? So instead of the builder being like a single tightly coordinated actor, the builder itself is this kind of market. So what is the kind of what's the benefit of this, right? And what's the reason why this might conceivably be able to win the market? The reason is basically that searchers become like become an open market, right? So instead of just being like, say, Jane Street being a builder or Binance being a builder, and they hire 100 of their own employees to do all of the kind of searching for MEV opportunities, and no one else can participate, you have an open market, and you have like, you know, random people all around the world that all create their own strategies that specialize in particular things. So you might have like some searchers that specialize in Binance arbitrage, some searchers that specialize in collecting liquidations, some searchers that specialize in you know, giving people guarantees that their transaction will be included and doing that really quickly. So you could have different searchers that have different roles. And so you could have like this really big set of searchers that's much bigger than the number of employees a single company can hire. And the open market can kind of aggregate all of them and basically be able to create this combined block offer that can bid higher than a single company that only has like a limited set of strategies can bid. The key challenge in this design is how to prevent builders and other searchers from cheating searchers, right? So if I'm a searcher and I have some strategies that make me really good at Binance arbitrage or make me really good at collecting liquidations, then if you're running this builder marketplace, then how can we prevent you from being able to look at my bundle and like basically you know, search and replace my address for your address and try to kind of steal my strategy? So it's the same challenge as builder proposer separation, but kind of one layer back, right? So it's like we're basically going from a block construction being like a 1-layer task to being a 2-layer task, and then to even being a 3-layer task. And like if you really wanted to, you could even have sort of meta searchers that aggregate different searchers. So the general solution path that I know about is like searcher bundles are encrypted until a block is locked in, right? So like searchers publish encrypted bundles, the builder operates only over encrypted bundles, and everything is encrypted until the moment where the block proposer agrees. And to make it even more robust, you could wait until after the block proposer agrees and attesters agree. So even the block proposer can't like equivocate and get slashed and cheat people. I mean, only then does everything get decrypted, and the block proposer publishes and everyone sees what's going on. Now the question is like how to do this magic encryption, right? So the magic encryption has to have 2 properties. One is it has to have guaranteed decryption when the block is when the proposer agrees and when the block is locked in. And 2, you have to be able to combine partial bundles, right? Like you have to be able to combine different sets of transactions. You might even want to be able to kind of verify like proofs that the transactions are valid, and what if some of the transactions are not valid in the context of other transactions. And so you might, like the searcher might even have to prove that they are making fees in a way that is kind of not dependent on ordering. So one way to do this is to have a trusted builder, and basically to have a builder that's like, hey, I'm the builder, trust me, and I have I'm an angel, I have a halo over my head, and you can trust me. So this is like pretty close to what Flashbots does today. The second strategy is to use SGX, right, to use trusted hardware. So basically all the searcher bundles get encrypted to a key to a public key where the private key only is accessible inside of an SGX module, or you could use other trusted hardware, and then you would have basically the entire system that actually combines bundles and like creates blocks and all of that would just live entirely inside of SGX, and everything would be like, they would not be able to see any bundles in the clear. They would only see the final blocks. Or you could have instead of SGX, you could also do multi-party computation, but that probably has overhead that's way too high. Or you might be able to do it if you have like fast ZK snarks, right? Like you could have a ZK snark that says like, hey, these are 3 transactions, and if you apply these transactions, then you have these 3 transactions, and the last transaction includes like this payments to the builder, and like you basically have like sets of encrypted transactions that come with proofs that they're encryptions of something valid, and then you just kind of have lots of these, and the builder then once the proposer proposes, the builder sort of decrypts all of them, and the only thing the builder has to do is compute a state root at the end, right? And compute a witness. So this, I think it does require kind of snarks over encryption. It might require snarks over the EVM. Actually, I haven't fully thought through this. Maybe there's a really clever way to avoid requiring snarks over the EVM. But the good news is that like snarks over the EVM are something that's increasingly getting better and better. So it might even be viable, right? So maybe there's a clever way to avoid a trusted builder and avoid SGX, but like this is a research problem, right? But like in general, if we can make a decentralized builder, and you can make a decentralized builder that's like actually good, then this will be another way kind of out of the world where Binance controls 60% of Ethereum blocks and Jane Street controls the other another 35%. So multiple, more paths to the same goal, right? So we can talk about like PBS in general. It ensures validator decentralization by sort of pushing all the centralizing stuff to the builder. There's the question of like, well, what happens if builders become hyper-centralized? One way to do it is to mitigate the censorship externality, and the other way to do it is to like try to create a decentralized builder that can beat out the centralized ones, and try to sort of fight for their
Sorry, centralized builder can never outcompete the centralized one. I
don't
believe that at all.
Okay, I mean,
like give me an argument, right? So like apart from all this very complicated stream knowledge stuff, you have to kind of prove. Like these builders working separately, right? They kind of always miss the opportunities a centralized party who sees all of this and can run this all in one ecosystem and the one umbrella kind of discross.
Well, right, but on the other hand, the argument is that because the decentralized builder is an open market, it's going to have access to a much larger number of people that can find MEV opportunities. So yeah, I mean, it's an open market structure question.
I think Francesco wants to speak up. He has a couple questions, but he's afraid of echo. So Francesco, you could try. You can try to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I agree that so I believe that it's centralized builder. But I don't really understand why I wouldn't understand. Like, how could we get to a point where, let's say, a sophisticated builder, a centralized builder, wouldn't also have access to the open market, instead basically would still be able to compete in 90 decentralized builder. Searchers would have incentives to send these bundles as far as they can, since if we can be trustless. If everyone has access to them, then we wouldn't have more sophisticated anything, and then like maybe have like some extra order flow or some other kind of like something alongside these models.
That's definitely a very good question. I think the argument here is basically that in order for a builder to be able to plug into searchers, it would, in this open market of searchers, it would need to be able to convince them that it's not strategy stealing. And the only way to convince them that it's not strategy stealing basically is to do this sort of thing where you use encryption of some kind. And so even if the thing lives in a data center, like you still have this property that the searcher has privacy. And like that actually already is like enough decentralization, right? Because if we're talking about censorship resistance, then like the searcher would be like basically any technique that's good enough to prevent strategy stealing would also be a technique that's good enough to prevent the or allow the searcher to include transactions that the centralized builder would want to censor.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I don't know, like if we imagine we have this magic encryption whatever thing, like then we could also do like just encrypt transactions, order them by a fee, and yeah, basically be done. Like instead of all of the other things. So I like this is
right.
Then we have like the complete.
Well, it depends, right? I mean, so the encrypt transaction thing is like it is a bit limited, right? Because it like so you would have to you could encrypt the contents, and you could have some mechanism where like in some future block you can like the next honest proposer just includes the decryption key, and they can kind of collect fees from it or whatever. But the problem is like you would still have to keep in plain text who the sender is, and like the verification logic, because Ethereum would have to like somehow know that whatever the thing is that it's including, it will be able to pay a fee, right? So if you want to censor a particular operation, you might be able to censor, but if you want to censor or you might not be able to censor, but if you want to censor an address, you would still be able to totally censor it. Like you could prevent someone from sending anything. So that's like one way in which just encryption by itself is not good enough. I mean, like you could, if you really wanted to, get around that with like a wrapper transaction where you have a transaction that like basically one of the things that it does is it does like a call internally, but then that's like that's the sort of technique that could be done in like any other system as well, I guess, right? So at that point, like the question is like, how is that better than just proposer censorship resistance lists? Right, like basically, if
the argument is more like the last thing you kind of presented. Like the assumptions there are so great that you can also solve all these problems there. You can just build a much simpler system. This is my basic point. Like, for example, if you see this trusted hardware box, then you can just
Well, I think the issue is that there's a lot of fancy cryptography that people are willing to put into layer 2, but they're not willing to put layer 1, because that fancy cryptography is like trusted hardware, especially, right? Like it is likely to break, and like if you really use it, you'd have to be ready to frequently update it. And even like a lot of this fancy ZK stuff, like it might be complicated and in a way that like layer 1 would not be willing to do it, but layer 2 can, because the consequences of things breaking at layer 2 are smaller. So like often I think the rationale for Ethereum doing things in these layer 2-y ways, when theoretically you could like bake everything into layer 1, basically is just that like Ethereum strives to have a simpler base layer, and so the complexity has to be shifted to layer 2 sometimes.
Francesco had a second question.
No, he said right. Makes sense, and no.
So what do you do if searches propose bundles which can I think
right.
It's up,
yeah. So
knowledge,
right. Okay. So that's a good one. I mean, one thing you could do was like you could do fancy set intersection stuff with like proposer with sender addresses, but that would be hard and that might break things. I think the more realistic approach is to just do a hard fork to modify Ethereum so that transactions that are invalid for like sender nonce reasons, they are valid. They just like don't do anything. And so that way, if you have like bundles, like you can always concatenate them and they're still valid.
Not a second transaction.
Right. Basically, yeah. The argument is like it's the searcher's responsibility when the searcher makes the bid in their bundle to kind of be comfortable with the fact that you know, maybe there will be something else in some previous bundle that conflicts with their bundle, and they just have to be okay with taking the risk of paying the fee for their bundle but not getting the benefits. So I guess kind of challenges in the PBS space in general, like one is to kind of agree on the in-protocol PBS design. So which is like two challenges, right? One of them is that, like, you know, there's a lot of different designs, and there's possibly other designs that haven't been considered yet. There's even like more moderate designs, like I've heard people that propose things like, oh, you know, most of the MEV actually comes from the first 5 transactions in a block, and so how about we just let the we just have a proposer builder market for the first 5 transactions, and we let the proposer choose all the other transactions, right? So, but then like I would argue that that particular idea like is probably worse than just doing a CR list, and the CR list has like basically the same effect. But like the point is, there's still like a space that you can think in, and there's still, I mean, to the extent that these existing designs have weaknesses, there's still kind of room to think through and try to come up with some approach that doesn't have those weaknesses. And also, the second issue is that the PBS design may depend on changes to a future Ethereum consensus, right? So we're actively researching this concept of single slot finality, where instead of the chain finalizing after like 2 epochs, which is 64 slots or about 13 minutes, the chain would finalize after. So I have a full consensus round, kind of Tendermint style, after every single slot. And this has a lot of advantages in making the chain more robust, but it does mean that like what we saw in the 2-slot design, right? Like how the PBS design is like very closely interwoven into the consensus, right? Like and if you want to properly optimize and kind of reduce slot times, then you know, you are going to have to sort of design the consensus around the PBS and design the PBS around the consensus to some extent. And so it may well be possible that we'll only end up just like getting both of these things at the time. So that's one challenge. Come up with a like maximally solve censorship resistance. So like figure out, you know, secondary blocks, CR lists, modifications to ERC 4337 to support CR lists. I wrote up a document on that recently.
Sorry, just a nuance to censorship resistance. So if I as a user want to make a transaction, which shouldn't be front, I have no ability to do that, right?
Well, I mean, the current approach is you could, you know, do like send it through Flashbots Protect, and I guess the hope in the future is that there will be searchers that like specialize in this task of they create, like, you send them a transaction and they just include a bundle that just contains your transaction, and the only thing they do is just like not show it to anyone. Yeah.
So I trust some whatever.
Right. Well, right. Yeah.
Kind of unsatisfying, I think.
Right.
I think this is something.
Yeah, I mean, I think
want to have. I don't know.
I agree. I mean, there's definitely like an assumption baked in here that like users are going to, well, not users, but like wallets are going to get more sophisticated, right? So like one of the ideas I mentioned is this idea that you know, users could pay extra priority fees for the privilege of like getting a promise of inclusion within 1 second, and if you do that, then like that requires the wallet to understand it. That requires the wallet to like understand, you know, which mechanisms for verifying these promises that trust and so forth. Or if you know, you want to do a kind of front run resistance thing, then you would have to choose you know, which searcher marketplaces you trust. Like actually, you might not even have to trust the searcher. You could even just like, you as a user could just create the one transaction bundle yourself and just ship it straight into the decentralized builder marketplace. But then like to do that, like, you know, you'd also have to kind of trust SGX or trust fancy witness encryption to kind of decrypt things automatically or whatever, right? So that's yeah. So like basically the idea here is that like wallets are probably one of the things that's going to end up sort of complexifying a little bit as a result of this transition. But the kind of positive thing that will come out of that, hopefully, is kind of better protection for users. And censorship resistance, make it like explore this idea of building market-winning, internally decentralized builders, right? So I think these are kind of the two tracks for how to mitigate, like how to make the world where Binance creates 60% of or constructs 60% of the blocks in Jane Street, constructs another 35%, kind of as non-dystopian as possible. One of them is solve censorship resistance using some kind of backup layer, and the other one is beat them both with a builder that's internally decentralized and better, and like basically make it good enough to present the case for why Binance and Jane Street should be searchers instead of being builders.
How do you define internally decentralized builders?
The idea that like a builder, instead of being a instead of being a firm in the Coasian sense of the firm, like is itself some kind of marketplace that has open participation. And so that would be one definition. Another kind of very pragmatic definition would be that an internally decentralized builder is a builder that accepts bundles from the outside and has the property that it doesn't know what it's accepting until after, or basically it has it accepts bundles from the outside and has some kind of mechanism where even if whoever's operating the builder doesn't want to, they might still get forced to accept other transactions, so they can't censor. Right. So so practical, so definition one, instead of being a firm, they're a marketplace. Definition two, they can't censor, and definition three, they can't strategy steal. And then another challenge is more exploration into this cross-domain MEV issue, because cross-domain MEV is also going to affect what the optimal designs in a lot of these cases are. And I think this is roughly where the space of dealing with MEV centralization is at.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is the most thorough TBS talk I've been to, although it's been.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first one that you allowed to be Vlad length,
Right, that's plus 2 hour plus, right? Yes. Oh, we forgot we have audience. Sorry. Oh, there are people jumping and clapping. Oh, okay. Thanks for jumping. Okay. Yeah, so I think next we have a discussion around MapBoost. And there's no slides or presentation, but if we can all see the HackMD doc, I have referenced all of the existing documentation that there is on MapBoost, as well as MapBoost, the GitHub repo is live on testbed. So do we want to take a quick break and get some water?
5 minutes.
Yeah, 5-minute break, and then we'll be back. All right, let's get started. Metacris, what would you like to share the screen?
I think just go to the
MapBoost
page first. No.
Which one?
No,
Oh, okay.
it's not this.
Yeah, you can have control over
Okay.
this, although like it's displaying on multiple screens. So
All right.
yeah.
Let's start here. Let's go into Q. Okay, let's keep this then a little bit shorter, like not an hour. But I was thinking now is it maybe a good time to just give a quick overview of the state of things at Flashbots, at the development, MapBoost, the relays, and then maybe we can discuss a few parts about the relays themselves. There has been a very interesting build-up so far, and the relays themselves, they pose a strong trust requirement. They have trust requirements from the builders, from the proposers, and there's a few, like I would like to mention a few of the risks, some mitigations that we have in mind, and then where to move from here. I hope people in Spatial can also hear me. I will just leave this open. There's also an API spec draft of the relays that includes APIs for the proposers, as we've worked them out with the EF guys in the builder specs, but also includes the APIs for block builders, and also includes some data APIs that seem pretty important to get data out of the relays about what payloads have been delivered to proposers specifically, but also kind of what bids have been received by builders and a few other events. So for instance, okay, current state of things, let's keep it real short. Thanks to a lot of collaboration with people from all over, from the consensus clients, from the EF, Light Client, and so on. The specs, they are finalized. MapBoost is basically feature complete and is being tested on all the networks. And I think the last thing is that a few consensus clients are still wrapping up the implementation. So Teku and Prism have full implementation. Lodestar is also just getting done, and Lighthouse has an open PR that's a little bit on secondary priority to get this finished, I think. And Nimbus is also in the process of finishing it. So all in all, this side of things looks pretty good. We have our relays. Yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, you can now run it. There is like some a PR that you can build yourself, and then some guides to how to do that and run it. So the function is there. But yeah, they will be there. Are you planning on using
I'm
Lighthouse?
just asking because part for Client University, there is no MMD books available. People will just switch back again. Then we end up with the same problem that there is.
Yes, absolutely. But the good thing is that we can like wholeheartedly also recommend Teku. Like,
yeah, I know, but that's going to be the same again, right? Everyone will switch the clients that have MMD available, and then they can switch.
So yeah, the concern maybe for online participants is that if not all consensus clients are ready, then this will lead to more adoption of those clients that have the builder specs implemented and is not helpful for the client diversity. But from the current point of view, everybody is like in the final stages of implementation, and this seems to be fine. There is not too much time left, I would say, but at least 3 out of the 5 are currently being tested, also in the shadow forks, and this seems well. The relays are particularly interesting pieces. So as a proposer, you add the relays with the relay public key as basically your trusted relay or a number of trusted relays, and the bits that the proposers receive from the relay are signed, and you can and MapBoost verifies that this is actually coming from the relay that you trust. some of the risks here include both on-chain chain liveness risks. For instance, so there's basically three problems that can arise from the release once a proposer signs a payload, which is the relay cannot release the block, the payload, that can withhold it. The relay can propose a bad block with like incorrect transactions or other incorrect properties, or the value that it's claiming to send to the proposer is not what's actually inside the block. And there's different mitigation ideas. So for the withholding part, it's kind of hard to attest this properly because it can also be network issues. Like there can be a networking issue on this side or on that side, and it's really hard to attribute that to malicious relay behavior, especially if it's like happening once. It's kind of impossible to know that the relay in this case we felt like without a committee or some way of like broadcasting the payload, it's not easy to say whether this was malicious behavior.
What does the proposer do in this case then?
The proposer misses the slot, and this is a slot without block.
Yeah, but apart from that, nothing, no slashing, no.
No, nothing very bad happens. It can just lead to a cascading, like to a continuous, like if one of multiple relays that most of the validators have configured keep withholding, then there can be like a long chain of just empty slots. This is basically kind of the worst case from the withholding perspective. Here, the mitigation that we are currently thinking about and working on is a circuit breaker mechanism inside the beacon nodes, that if there is like too many empty slots, that beacon nodes would stop using the builder network, would stop interacting with MapBoost, and that they would require a special API call or a restart or whatever mechanism to restart using the external builder network. So this is like one proposers can. Another approach here is a relay monitor, which is possibly again a trusted service thing that a proposer can configure, that it sends the bits also to the relay monitor and to the relay, and the relay monitor requests the payload as well as the proposer itself requesting the payload from the relay. In this case, the relay monitor would also receive the final payload, could simulate it, could verify that the block is valid and that the payment is correct. And if that a relay is not doing that correctly, could penalize the relay and leading basically to all the proposers using the relay monitor having information about problems arising with any specific proposer.
Like as a solo validator, you depending on more entities. You depend on the relay, on the then you depend on I don't know what.
We don't depend on the builder.
Okay, you depend on the relay, but maybe that.
Everybody depends on the relay actually.
Yeah, kind of like maybe a feature request. I don't know, but most of the MEV that's done right now is the arbitrage or sandwich. So like those two or three things capture most of the MEV that's being done. So maybe have something like MEV where you just have like a wallet where you deposit your own funds as a solo staker, and you locally do those MEV stuff yourself instead of depending on the relay. And only then, when the relay has a better block found than you have, then you actually take the block from the relay.
I mean, you can always run. I mean, this means like you run your own builder.
Yes, you do. And like also like for most MEV, you don't need that much. I think 100 Ether does most of the MEV. And I think people also underestimate how much Ether Solus is. I mean, they already need 32 Ether to get started, so the chances of them having more Ether is quite high. Maybe make accessible for everyone.
Do we have good numbers on like how much MEV you can get just with on-chain stuff, how much you can get with like also having a Binance in front of arbitrage, and like how much you get with other things? Like, is that something that you're good statistics on?
Well, Elaine is on the line from our data team. Can you rephrase the question? Yeah.
Do we have good statistics on like how much MEV can be collected just by running kind of pure algorithms on only Ethereum transaction and mempool data versus how much can be collected by also plugging into Binance and doing arbitrage against Binance versus how much can be collected through like more complicated cross-domain stuff?
I think there's no comparison, but Jin just recently did an analysis on I think Binance.
Yeah, she might be a person to reach out.
Well, is there a number?
Not that we have right now, I think.
Well, presented it internally, but I don't recall the number. But it was a lot.
Right, like if the number is a lot, then like I think that's kind of precludes the possibility of like being more.
Basically, I think the takeaway was that there's cross-chain in terms of on-chain and off-chain MEV is a lot. Right. And I can't now recall, but the profit was higher. So currently, like profitability is like 90-95% go to the miners. There it was like 20%. So profit for researchers is a lot.
But with the things I said, people could also do arbitrage on Binance themselves, right? They won't depend on
right,
Binance.
but like then you're talking about home stakers needing to have Binance. Like not your permission anymore.
It isn't, but it doesn't rely on Binance sending you the.
No, but it would you need to have a Binance again.
I'm not sure whether this assumption or this conclusion stands like when there is competition.
You mean this?
Seems
yeah, I think this is his point. Like this 20% basically tells you there is not a lot of competition, because if there was, it would be a lot less. Like a lot more would go to miners.
Yeah, well, like I think it's the suggestion like that. Solo stakers become builders.
Right. Well, I mean that was what was brought up, right? And like the statistic I want to know is like, is it the case that if you're just running best-in-class MEV algorithms like the transactions, on average you can get like 0.023 block, but if you also have a Binance arbitrage, you can get 0.024, or is it 0.045, or is it 0.345?
I mean, I don't have percentage numbers, but the Ethermine has its own arbitrage bot, which only does simple arbitrage, and we don't do any scientific, so it's just arbitrage. And I think over the last, I'm not sure, like 1 year, it's made around 3,000 or 4,000 Ether. Okay, so it's right. I mean, it depends on the hash rate as well. So if
right. Okay, so 1 year, 30 milliseconds, about 2.5 million blocks. So Ethermine is like some portion of that, so about 700,000 blocks, 3,000 or 4,000 so that's going to be about 0.005 per block, which is like a pretty substantial fraction of MEV, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. But there was a question about your bidding strategy.
What was the question?
That will get discussed deeper later. Last time we talked about, I think, that you bid as the highest.
Yes.
You peep into the net pool. Oh, you peep into the So you will pay as high as the highest bidder.
Yeah.
But you don't copy there.
I mean, it's strategy. Right now it's that way, but I think once we'll just use it for start and see how it goes. The only reason why we use this, why we weren't able to use thresholds only is because of front running and compliance reasons.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, we'll go back to the compliance reasons over there. But Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. The other issues that like relays, malfunctioning relays could pose is that they claim incorrect values or do not verify the builder values correctly, because the beacon node right now, it has no way to actually verify the values. Pardon? Yeah, the bits, the claim value in the bits. So it just takes whatever relay gives the highest value on face value. And here it would be really useful if the NVB boost has a way, or the beacon node has a way to actually.
So it feels like it feels to me like the chain line of the values is probably the worst kind of attack, right? Because so invalid blocks and missing blocks are basically the same. Block to the network, invalid block is just. But it's what all that you can do, all that the builder can do is they can just not publish, or really they can not publish, and if they not publish, the proposer loses, but the builder also loses. And like the builder maybe gets like some complicated strategy, or the proposer like in the next round and they get AVB, but like that's much less. But if they cheat on the bid, then like they can basically steal the proposer's entire AVB game, right? So is it the simplest strategy to fix or to kind of protect against those kinds of attacks to like just show the local branch showing down from the block header to the transaction of the bid?
I know that internally there was, I think Tomasz mentioned that wouldn't you need a separate state route to verify?
Why? No, you just have you just gave the first transaction. You just have work over. It doesn't even have to be the first transaction. In fact, it could be any transaction. Because like if that transaction was valid for any reason, like if it doesn't have enough or whatever, then that block is invalid.
Oh, a question. Can a builder, if he adds a transaction, a payment transaction at the end of the block, already access the funds he would have received in the transaction before?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So a payment proof here would be helpful. It's also important to consider that builder payments are in case of a reorg, the builder payment transactions will also go and become public. So they need some kind of reorg protection.
Yeah, one way you could have builder payments coming out of a fresh account, where that fresh account kind of grabs all of the revenues in the way.
Right.
But then that would not be provable because, like, from the outside, that account would have a balance 0. Right. Yeah. Okay. So the builder would have to risk and actually, is there like it feels like the like that kind of like create a fresh account thing is like equally with the builder can avoid the risk, right? Unless the payment itself happens like 1 block later or something.
It could go through a smart contract where it provides the certainty that the block is actually this number, no? Or the parent.
Well, I mean, number you can easily whatever block replaces it would have. Well, I guess if there's an output for the slot, then like you can do it based on.
You want to go into the proof design?
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
So you want a proof for what exactly?
Can you go back to the other tab? So on the one side, you want the proposer to know or to have a certain guarantees that the payment that the bid claims is also actually in there, in the block where you don't see the transactions beforehand. This is what you want to prove with a payment proof.
Okay, so that the builder knows already where the bid should be paid to. So the builder knows who the
yes, the
builder
builder already knows the proposal to the recipient.
He wants to prove that hey, the bid and you get the money to the relay in the first.
It should be included in the bid that the relay sends to the proposer. Actually, the relay could also construct the payment proof, probably. Like, it doesn't need to come from the builder necessarily, because in the end, the proposer trusts whatever the relay sends them. There is like no requirement on any builder signature. This is on the one side, and with that, yeah, that would give the proposer some knowledge about what's happening inside this block, that the payment is not just a number that is claimed in the bid, but actually has a proof that this is inside. And on the other side here, there could be fraud proofs.
You in principle have to also prove that the block is valid, right? Because otherwise there is no guarantee again. But yeah. Because the merge branch thing works, right?
It should work. I don't recall why we had what was the discussions about that detail. I know that Thomas had some. Well, either way.
Or you trust the relay verifying that total is actually like the bundle is actually a good one. Like having the bundle and
yeah, having the block, and then the relay knows the block. The relay part of the relay's responsibilities is making sure that the block is correct, all the transfers are correct, that the payment is correct.
Yeah.
But you still trust the relay on that.
Yeah.
A payment proof would reduce the trust needed somewhat.
I think it's still bad if you trust the relay on the bids. You mentioned this 100 million, so maybe it's worth to cheat once.
Yeah.
If you can cheat with 100 million and say that I'm a trusted relay, then I'm okay with cheating once, 100 million, goodbye my friends.
Yeah.
The problem with all fraud groups without money at stake.
Right.
Right? It's
Well, I guess I still think that like should be able to avoid fraud groups. Like one kind of attack you should do with the Merkle branch, and the other kind of attack is like not uniquely attributable anyway.
Can you explain the second?
Oh, the second is just like block unavailability. Like,
So you don't think the fraud group payment fraud group is
like in general, I just think that like fraud groups have like always have like more economic complexity. And I think people want to provide a Merkle branch that's definitely the first approach, even if that like involved in.
It would still require changes to the client, so the execution layer client especially, because there is currently, as far as I am aware, not an API that the Beacon node or MathBoost could use.
Right, but so this is not a proposer side thing, this is the builder side thing, right? And the builder has to create the proof.
The builder has to create the proof, but ideally, MathBoost or the proposer would be able to verify.
But there's already like sort of libraries.
Right.
Yeah, like verifying the
Cool. Yeah. And then on the other side of the equation could be fraud proofs if this could not automatically be proven, but that should actually be possible, where anybody could submit proof of misbehavior of a relay, and this would penalize the relay. There has been some discussions about that earlier here on this second document that is linked, and also in what is happening.
I didn't do it. Yes.
Well,
You can just control it. Yeah.
and also in this GitHub issue here about chain liveness. Yeah. Well, other points of discussion were like permissionless builder access. From the proposer and not from another builder. Well, when a builder submits a bit to the relay, it's signed by the builder, but then the relay changes the data structure, makes a blinded payload of that, and then signs it itself and provides it with a get header API that the proposer is using, but that also anybody else can use. Because it's
I suppose like okay, not restricted.
Exactly, and it's not restricted currently because there is no proposer signature, and that would be then a closed bid auction because.
Right. Well,
So what you're suggesting is like only the next proposal is
only the proposal.
Yeah. So
what is it like half open, half sealed?
I mean, it would be seen because the builders don't see each other's, but
Like,
a proposer could collude.
With these lower bits.
Lower bits, why?
I think they probably have to check with the kind of option theory, but
If you have like only one bit to place, then you kind of try to. I would imagine that the builder tries to bit higher.
Anything that's hard, like this, I can do the one that predicts these. The more confirmed Google does, the less interesting for me to hold it in the state properly minimum.
Well, you could just have the builder publish the after this one.
Yeah, then I guess other people would be the same one. But if I, like, it is an advantage for me, like, if 90% of the process, then right? That's a huge opportunity. I can just place them. I can do that, and I have like something more. Like, he said, or it's like that's something I can develop that I have. So I want to think that.
yeah, this is exactly why we don't want it, right? Because you guys want it.
Yeah, but I think that's kind of something, right? What do you want to find? It's possible, right? At some point, if Ethereum has set it down, that's where open source software because that's fine. Just kind of like Congo. Right, well, everyone gets like a share. But if you want this very efficient to do things and new teams that develop, they need a proper move.
Right. Well, the challenge is like if I guess if the proposer has the like exclusive view on that, like what the bidding patterns are, that's like has the incentive to be a sophisticated proposer.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm going to try.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not too bad because you just have to bribe like a 1 or 2 between the proposer and the relayer. Well, I guess relayers are. Well, I mean, if we're honest, but like if we set the social norm, those the relayers who give that stuff away.
And I will add a link to the GitHub issue here about the sealed versus open bits, because there has been like a lot of discussion and a lot of participants, also from Chain Street people chiming in here in favor of open bit auctions and the auction dynamics. And I'm not sure, but it seems to change this.
Robert literally just was like, can you please make sure that we have something over here because there's no conclusion on sealed versus open bit, right?
There is no, I think
That will never be a conclusion. I guess.
What
like,
happens if there's just some
There needs to be an
people that
implementation.
approach and some rulers that do?
The problem is that you can't do the closed approach because the proposers don't add a signature.
No, but okay, let's say the proposer.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That's well. That's an interesting thought experiment. Like, what would happen now?
How would you decide the winner then? Do you keep this?
The proposer decides the winner.
Also decides the highest value. Some relays do it closed, some relays do it open. I guess even Flashbots could run two relays, like one with sealed and one with open bits. See how it's developing. Interesting thought. Yeah, I will
do lots of efficiency, but you could also use closed second bit option. Like I don't know, they probably have awesome advantages and disadvantages, right? Like with voting, right? There's no perfect voting. It's kind of, I don't know.
Yes, sure.
So I guess maybe trying like adding the things so that we can implement both. Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, not such a bad idea.
The release is certainly an interesting playground for trying, like for where different ideas could get tried out. I know there's some resistance.
I don't think it makes much of a difference. I don't believe it. Really, it's like you can. I think you can spend ages on. Deciding on what my feeling about it.
I think it matters a lot for the market participants. It matters to all the, and also it matters in some sense to the trust, like or like the fairness. Is that why like most right now it's one of the most?
I think. Sealed, I think, makes it. Like if you have it sealed, you open it up for more strategic whatever. Like if you have this closed information games, right? So you give them more options in a way to kind of play around. But actually, I think this is maybe one.
I think if you ever change one, on things, simple ability is very simple. It's fine engineers that option code and get custom. What shops do is they sophisticated more. I mean, of course, they want completely trivial strategies and then try hybrid and then next to it's very good. I can scale it up to 100,000 people because it's much easier to find like a person who can take innocently and optimize it. I have to find a person that like creatively thinks, how can I model this living process and trains like a custom deep render sometimes. So of course they want to like reduce the strategy complexity and increase the infrastructure complexity. That's it's capital intensive, it's power intensive, like for example. I mean, like you don't have the manpower to train like 400 exchanges, right? And they just do extremely like groups like Ember or stuff like that. They have extremely simple software, right? That just is very optimized and runs on 400 exchanges because they have a ton of people that is implement. And it's much easier to find a kind of people that improve on the exchange API, kind of people that like do a creative thing or like some complex game that has import information. That's exactly what is paid off in like Christian market. I mean, they've lobbied the SEC to put in rules so you can't do specific strategies and then it just brought up and then that's okay, right? But that's not like a computer science. So I think it's clear day.
Thanks for the inputs. I think the very interesting discussions. I think maybe we conclude this part now, and considering the time, we may want to move on to more lightning talks.
Yeah, I think let's go through the lightning talks and then let's head out to dinner at like 8 something. It's like 20 minutes walking from here. That's the dinner place. So that we have a reservation at 8.
This means we leave in 1 hour,
So yeah, so we leave in 1 hour, we're good. But this is super, I think, important and relevant discussion. I think there's also time sensitivity to the field versus.
I mean, I think not necessarily, because I think for the merge, like it's just kind of set in stone for now that like this is not a short-term change to make it a SILPIT, unless there's like a lot of high-level push in that direction and discussions. But there's so many moving parts that I think this point has passed for now. Okay. And this is something that could be considered for later on. You can change it later. Yeah. I mean, the consensus layer clients, they are a bit resistant to adding new signature routines. So to add, there's maybe ways around that, but it's all something that is now already too packed and resource constraints to. This is like the impression that I had. There needs to be more consensus and resources from consensus client teams to implement this to even enable SILPIT auctions.
Basically, we're going forward, like, unless there's some major issue that arises.
Yes, this is my impression, that is like just also because of the state of discussions and the technical simplicity, and to just do what is possible right now.
Is there any, like, with the MEV before the merge, what do you think are the biggest challenges that researchers or transparency or various others could dip into, like, contribute, or maybe get some help from Ecoline to contribute?
I think it's mostly about the impacts on proposers of misbehaving relays. Because MeshBoost itself is, I mean, it's basically done. It's feature complete. It's just a relay multiplexer. The challenges arise. What happens when relays are not behaving well? The areas where, like reputation systems, with a relay monitor, like the payment proofs and. Yes, it is.
For relay monitor. Why we need it.
Yes, I think just ideally we want to make it easier to detect and automatically act on misbehaving relays, but to also make it easier to propose adding other relays. Like right now, it's kind of a tough call to say add also these 5 relays, and we recommend like this list of 10 relays. Like each relay added to your proposal list adds possible risk.
That's why I'm saying that there are no incentives that people run them. Second of all, like nobody's promoting any other relays because everyone does transactions. So there are so many things. Like there is no reason for anyone.
Actually, you should only pick one because every other reduce the security.
Like Blackboard also positioned themselves the entity to trust makes it even more complicated for anyone else to.
That's true. I think, I mean, Bloxroute is setting themselves up with a no front-running relay, like an ethical relay branding kind of thing, where this could be one differentiating factor.
That's what I was managed relay, and kind of anyone who promoted the idea can run it. Who will run it if it's not more profitable? Most of the people just.
Yeah, if you just care about the.
Sorry, just one thought on this. So actually, if you think like you really want this, and it's not all about profit, right? Then you in the end have to make it on the protocol level, and then people would actually use it on the protocol level. Like this is the only way you kind of could get, I think, this non-economical ideas, what like more fair definition of ordering or whatever you kind of want in there, but like to get those into the systems, you have to step away from these economic models, and then you can only do them like very deep protocol level.
transition to the
to your talk. So we have within Flashbox, our researchers also think a lot about these kind of questions and what we're currently doing. So yeah.
What do I have to do?
I think you just is your tab open? Just switch to the other tab. The left, or the side, yeah. And the, oh, sorry. The one in the middle. Sorry, that was. Yeah. And then you open up a new tab.
The slides link at the bottom.
Yeah. Yep. Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and then you can do the presentation mode.
Don't find any spelling errors.
Perfect. I'm not.
Big shout out for the ISO format page.
So, and why am I holding this?
So that the online participants can hear you.
Ah, the microphone. Ah, okay. Hello, internet.
You have a microphone, right?
All Wi-Fi microphone will be useful for this.
Oh, well, next time we'll learn.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna make this quick, so there's less time between us and the lunch or dinner. So
Same amount of time between us and dinner.
it is. Well, anyways, so this is the about the first come first serve ordering chain idea. The name is not. Don't take it with a grain of salt. So it has much of a little bit of first come first serve, much of ordering, and basically no chain. It's joint work with Alex from Flashbox. We presented this beginning of May or so internally in Flashbox, and right now like extended it a little bit for Vienna Square.
So I guess a question I have for you is that is this a serious proposal or is it a stroke?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna come to that. I mean, it's more like exploration of the solution space with I think like at least for us like interesting insights, much more than like a serious solution. But we tried to achieve a solution, but we didn't succeed. Well, at least this is my current take.
You didn't succeed yet.
Yep. Yeah. Can I continue this?
Space also works normally.
Usually arrows here.
Oh, wait, maybe.
Or peak ones maybe and then.
I do not.
Or maybe the screen is.
But I cannot even. Yeah, I cannot even escape from the full screen.
I tried. There's nothing. This is so maybe we don't do full.
Does it skateboard?
No.
Nothing works.
It happens usually sometimes in Rachel. This kind of glitch happens. It happens even more likely when you have multiple displays and connect to Bar.
I'm gonna try. Like,
Maybe you should think some other stuff.
Well, it does work, but it did work only in the.
Oh.
Here it works.
Okay.
I can see in the preview, but it's not working there.
Right. So it's a screen display issue.
Like Zoom is the most reliable so far. It used to be so much like the company we always use Zoom.
You think it's a screen share?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's a screen sharing thing. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's
It's one of those. Okay. There you go. So, yeah, perfect. You got it. Just try it again. Don't full screen this time. Yeah. Let's try to run through it. Sorry about that, everyone.
Okay, so it's about the fair ordering thing. Like the question that brought me to that is like, is MEB inevitable or can it be prevented? So the question kind of haunts me now for some time, and I still don't have an answer. So this first come first serve ordering chain is kind of more in the area of it can be prevented. So that was the idea. Let's have a look at like why does MEV exist in the first place. So if we look at the attacks on transactions, we'll have like replay attacks. So we have countermeasures. So if you think about what prevents the replay of transactions, we have nonces. What prevents the modification of transactions, we have digital signatures. But what prevents the reordering of transactions? There's nothing. We don't have any countermeasures, and this is the very reason that MEV exists in the first place. So now you could just say like, well, order all the transactions, problem solved. And intuitively, like first come first serve transaction ordering is like what everyone has in mind. If you think about transaction ordering, like what is your method to order transactions? First come first serve is what people come up with intuitively. We have discussed initially. We have an upcoming article specifically on first come first serve ordering protocols. Like the TLDR is like the first come first serve ordering protocols alone can only mitigate reordering attacks to a certain extent. It cannot prevent them completely unless you go for permissioned networks or are willing to make like maybe unreasonable assumptions. But nonetheless, we had a look at first come first serve transaction ordering as a building block for this idea here. So what were the goals? The goals were to prevent so-called bad MEV. That is like, no, we want to prevent front running, we want to prevent sandwiching, and we want to have everyone else participate in all the remaining MEV. So everyone should have access to arbitrage and backrunning. So these were the goals. And as I said in the beginning, this is more like an exploration than like a real solution, but still gonna explain like what we came up with. So the system in a nutshell is basically three entities. You have users on the left-hand side, in the middle like a first come first serve ordering mempool / block building system, and on the right-hand side minus. Users send unordered encrypted transactions, and the block building system outputs blocks that miners have to use. So this requires a change in the consensus rule. Miners have to use your battery is running low. Okay. So the idea here, like in order for the block building system to be able to use first come first serve, right, and not cheat, like why they have to use have to work on encrypted data. Otherwise they could just cheat. But if they work on encrypted data, they don't know exactly what they are ordering, so there's no incentive to cheat, right? So they're just basically ordering random data from the perspective of this ordering system. Good, thanks. Right, and since the output of the block building system should be valid blocks, users have to also submit and prove that they are actually submitting valid transactions. Okay, so why encrypted transactions? Well, actually encrypted twice. So the transactions are encrypted that the ordering system cannot like manipulate the order of transactions in some meaningful way. And at the end of the ordering step, like the first layer of encryption is removed. But at that point, the ordering system has a kind of an advantage, right? They're the first ones to see the transactions in the clear. So while the order is fixed, they could still they're the first ones to see it in clear, and they could take all the arbitrage and backrunning opportunities. So because they could see the first in clear text, react on that, submit their own transactions, get it ordered first. So we don't want it. So in order to mitigate that, like users also encrypt to miners or validators, such that this first come first serve ordering pool cannot has no advantage in backrunning or arbitraging.
Yeah, no, the miners.
Right. That's completely right. Right. I mentioned the validity proofs. So in order to come up with valid blocks, this users also need to attach validity proofs for the transactions. There's a lot of questions like, is this even feasible? Technical issues, right? But we're not going like we don't have to go there. So now we can say, okay, first goal is reached. Like this, front running is prevented, sandwiching is prevented. What about this good MEV? Can everyone participate in good MEV? Like Philip already said, like, well, miners seem to have an advantage, right? Miners are now in the position to take all the backrunning and arbitrage opportunities because they are the first one to see the transactions in clear text, can submit the transactions, and because they're ordered first come first serve, they get basically the large chunk of the cake. So this is kind of a latency game. So what we thought, like, okay, how can we make this then accessible to everyone, right? I mean, this was basically the second goal: make this arbitrage and backrunning opportunities accessible to everyone. And for this ordering system needs to distinguish between conflicting and non-conflicting transactions. So think about it like this arbitraging or backrunning opportunities is like a conflict, right? There's a single resource, like an EVM address that multiple transactions want to write to, and you need to come up with a precedence, like who is going to win. It's just one who can win. And the others are non-conflicting transactions, and you can just run them in parallel. I think Shin mentioned in this article about EVM parallelization, you could just execute them in parallel because they're not touching the same EVM address space. But the conflicting transactions, they need to come up with something how to resolve this conflict. So what we had, like, two ideas. You could do some kind of auctions, like the auctions, or some kind of lottery where you buy tickets, and the more tickets you have, the higher the probability of you winning. So it could be something like that.
Yeah, like so the first come first serve. Like if you think about like we have assumed this slot, then like okay they get it first, but like the slot they get it second earlier than everybody else. So there's still 11 seconds left for blocks to kind of fill up. If you only based on that, like order by to do something, like your first option here, then I think you're pretty close to making arbitrage more accessible, right?
Right. I mean, there's many open questions, like how would we implement an auction system here, like in a non-trusted way. This, also, how much information do you leak?
Yeah.
Okay, so some insights we gained from like exploring this. Like MEV was like for us this was kind of not intuitive. Alex came up with the term like conflict resolution, and it kind of stuck to me. Like MEV seems to be all about conflict resolution. You have this like multiple transactions, they all want to go for the same EVM address, want to write to, and somehow need to resolve this conflict. And it was an interesting thing, like to think about it that way. And you, right, and like all the other transactions, like if let's assume you have a conflict resolution mechanism, whatever it is, and it works well, like all the remaining transactions, you can literally be ordered in any way. It doesn't matter because they don't conflict. But you can perfectly.
You don't even need consensus for them.
Yeah. So it comes down to like a conflict resolution mechanism. And this first come first serve ordering is just a very particular way of resolving this conflict. So right, it's like, okay, you were first, so you should be the one who wins. But it's like, while it's intuitive, it's also very particular. It's not really. Maybe it's not the conflict resolution mechanism we want. So Yeah, open questions. Like, I mean, I started with the goals. We want to prevent front running, and we want to make arbitrage and back running accessible. But are these really the right goals? Because depending on how you set them, you can come up with totally different systems. So, personally, I would argue like, it feels good, like preventing front running. That people like access and arbitrage, it feels good. But there's also people arguing differently. It seems like it's not the most optimal to prevent front running. We should include front running. For me, it's an open question. Like how to incentivize like the ordering mempool, the nodes in the ordering mempool, or like a conflict finding or resolution mechanism. How do you incentivize them not to collude? And how much information is leaked to a conflict resolution mechanism? Like if you have, for example, you need access lists in order to figure out like what EVM addresses transactions are touching. How much information is leaked by that? Yeah. That's all really. So
maybe what are the arguments for front running first?
I'm not just repeating the argument. I'm not in favor of it. But it's about efficiency. So you can have like a more optimal, welfare optimizing way with front running. You could, for example, if you think about like it depends on how you define front running. But if you have multiple swaps on a DEX, for example, you have like 3 buys, 3 sells. Then if you when you have 3 buys in a row and then 3 sells, it's more optimal to say like 1 buy, 1 sell, another buy, another sell. So front running, like a reordering that's like optimizing the welfare of users.
Simple one is just that like the prices over the course of block on buy, and if you have a good ordering, so like submit an arbitrage transaction to even swap every 200 milliseconds, and that leads to like lots of gas overhead on chain. Whereas if you kind of make it more discrete, then like you lose that inefficiency. So I guess that's one. Another line of arguments would be the kind of auction by another means argument that like there are if you put a premium on time, there are ways to kind of still get ahead on time, right? Like we're basically kind of going back to sort of the old high frequency trading world of like if you have better tables, then you can run it loss. So I think like the arguments for kind of just having auctions instead of this, even if this works really well, I think would look very similar to the arguments of crash auction. One other question, like how exactly would this like ordering mempool or like the ordering or conflict resolution work? Like what's the implementation?
Yeah, well, there's like if you think about first come first serve. Right. I mean, like a very simple one. Let's put it this way. Let's think you have just a single entity. Like in the single entity, you send transactions to.
Right,
it's right. Super easy to order the transactions. They just by the time the entity receives the transactions. Right. If you have a single entity, it's easy. Right. Because right. That's easy. Now, if it gets more tricky, if you have multiple entities and you should like come to a consensus, like what is the order, right? I think this is basically equivalent to the clock synchronization problem in distributed systems, because this basically comes down to exactly that. In a more malicious setting, right? Because you have maybe nodes that you cannot trust, but it's basically that. How can you? I mean, like clock synchronization is basically about the order of events, distributed system. And this is what we work on. Here it's like the order of transactions, but it's the same thing. And there you have the issue that the granularity that you can there exist multiple clock synchronization algorithms. You can apply basically any of them.
Right,
but you have right, yeah. So, but I mean, you can, let's say you can also do like a simple voting. Let's say if you have just 3 entities, you can take the median. Right. So it's very simple.
One problem is like, well, you can't just do the median by itself because that would be one location.
To what?
Equivocation, like people can send multiple messages, or like some of the participants might even kind of go offline for a while and then come back after. Like,
right.
Typically, the best you could do like is some form of like 2/3 majority inputs, like use inputs from 2/3 of the nodes, and kind of just have to like assume that better you cannot ensure that you have more inputs. Like if transactions are sent to all nodes, right, and then in the end you get a fair ordering from 2/3 of those nodes.
Well, you can't take like this isn't one of those like correct or incorrect, right? It's a timestamp that have to like use median.
And there,
well, you have in the end you have 2/3 nodes agreed on
right. But
what their value should be.
Right, but like what if one set of 2/3 agrees on one median and one agrees?
Well, the consensus algorithm truth there is only one.
Basically, right.
I don't know.
Like the issue is like you're basically like what we don't want to see is like hundreds of signed messages overhead per transaction, right? Like in some ways, like the whole point of a blockchain is that we do things like instead of transactions. That's that way.
Yeah, but like then you can just like do this decision on like the fetch transaction.
Yeah. Okay. Like at some point, you're just basically saying like we're gonna make a chain and have options within the chain that have the block time be like 1 second.
Get it?
Like once you start like doing batches and then you start like, then you know you're obviously gonna end up with like actually doing these batches, and at that point you're just saying like we're gonna do some like auctions, but we would just have shorter block time.
Not sure.
I think the problem like with time here is that you have like only some like the granularity to which you can order transactions, like on some distributed system is much worse than like intuitively people like think it is. Like it have this end-to-end delay uncertainties, they affect the granularity, and it's I guess
the bigger problem is everybody lies about everything.
One kind of way to break something to make it more would be to allow the choose which 2/3 form. Because that like the proposer would still have some freedom, and there would still be like some proposer MEV you might want to auction that, but then like it would still be really constrained. Your transaction will be seconds.
I don't think it's a good idea to have anybody like a proposer shouldn't be able to do anything. This is like I don't know. The only way around it. They shouldn't be allowed to decide.
Consensus algorithms are like more efficient able to do bottlenecks, right? Like single action bottlenecks. There are consensus algorithms that avoid it, but they're way more complicated.
Yeah, like even with there's versions of Hotspot, for example, which they have leaders like significant proposer, but like their only job is to take what somebody like a quorum of people is saying. So they cannot decide on anything on their own, right?
How would that even work? Like if the quorum already agrees.
No, in the process of getting the agreement. First, you have already have it.
Right, but like, so the process of getting it would involve leaders, and like whenever you just have an on.
Well, that's kind of, I don't know if the leader can. I actually don't think this is necessarily the case. But yeah, if you have an honest disagreement, you have to resolve it. And this is what the consensus protocol, like in the end, like Lampert's famous result either you don't terminate or you use some kind of parameters to kind of converge to some. Yeah.
There are consensus algorithms that like do avoid the leaders, but like, well, one of the early versions of like dominant booleans and stuff, like tried really hard to use them, but then eventually they gave up on them. I'm not really sure why, because the math is really cool, but I guess they just decided that it's hard. But like basically, like there's just like this complexity cost that I would be worried about.
I mean, for the
I think one more thought. I think not necessarily like avoiding leaders, but like restricting what leaders are allowed to do. Yeah. Yeah. So more like, kind of limit the options of what a validator node can decide.
I guess what I mean is that like if that limit is greater than which like could be fine if that role is like only like worth 2%.
But regarding the consensus, I think that Mahima's original work on this fair order consensus, I think this like you get, I'm not sure about the exact number, but they get to consensus pretty quickly. But the point is, I think my argument there would be that the granularity is super weak, so you have basically a lot of uncertainty what like on the order of the transactions, but as soon as you let's say transactions are sent like 2 blocks apart, then it's easy to find an order, or let's say 1 block time apart, and it's easy to find an order also with their algorithm. But if it's like if you send transactions within like a second or 2, then you will have a lot of uncertainty, and they will be ordered wrongly or.
Right. Well, I think my worry would be that like would have the like the edge case of what happened precisely in those moments when they're worth the most.
That's the point. Yeah, that's my main counter argument against this particular algorithm.
Right.
But I guess you could still like have some like first like personally like if I were to design this, I would totally use the first an assumption on synchronized clocks and then go from there. Then make it more efficient. I mean, we at least we know the limits of those protocols already. So.
Thank you. Well, I guess we transition to yours.
Steven, I guess you were the next one, right? From the.
I think the order is yours next. Yeah.
I make it very quick. Maybe you can just.
Click on just scroll down. Yeah.
We have about 25 minutes in total until we leave.
Yes.
I try to make it great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Tina is.
I got it. Okay.
You're moving the mouse.
Do I click on the?
No, just the picture for first. So for the microphone. Maybe we can make it a bit bigger.
Supposed to. It's not doing what it's supposed to. Can you double click? It's supposed to just go. Yeah. They have. Yes.
Maybe.
Perfect.
So we actually did a quite simple and easy to understand paper, I would say, on so-called opportunistic algorithmic double spans, which is a kind of a different form of double spans from what we all used to see and hear about and know. So on the left side, we have a classical double spend where there is a fork in the blockchain, and we basically like equivocate and try to push a different transaction in. And for an algorithmic double spend, we basically use the transaction semantic itself, and the fact that in certain blockchains, this transaction semantic might depend on blockchain state, on context, on external information to do something else, right? And this actually, for the case for Ethereum, for example, we can implement such a we call this semantically malleable transaction with very few overhead. So for an ERC20 transfer, for example, we have about 8% cost increase to doing that, which basically means that if somebody would use this, or if it would be widely used as a kind of strategy to use this kind of transactions, then in case some fork happens, it would kind of have a interesting cascading effect of the whole blockchain state. Like you have fork and the whole blockchain state kind of diverges and has like very, very systematic implications from basically like a simple idea that you just embed some different kind of logic. Simplest thing is like you build on a block hash from a previous block or block height. But actually the same issue also applies in other systems which don't have this like full like Turing complete language to write your scripts or contracts in. So for example, in Bitcoin, you have these dependencies on the UTXOs, and in principle your transaction is like fully deterministic, and you may assume that this is actually not possible there, but actually there is a corner case where this problem even arises in Bitcoin on this 100 bound 100 block bound for the miner reward paid out. And even like systems like Cardano, which use this UTXO model, kind of face this problem. And like similar patterns to these are kind of observed already in lots of kind of math-related contracts and patterns, and like the opcodes which can be used to implement such a malleable transactions are, I don't know, there is a figure in the paper, I don't recall the number, but like lots of transactions actually use this kind of opcodes, and maybe could lead to such effects we basically described here. So this is a very simple high-level idea behind the paper, what we had a closer look at. Yeah, and actually this just want to credit to the other guys in the team. So actually I was just like very briefly involved with this, and like most of the work was done not by myself but by Nicholas and Ayosh on this topic. Yeah, I think I forgot something. If I should mention some important other things. Yeah, we have like in detail shown when this is a problem, in which cases, and formally shown different things about it. Yeah, and like mitigations maybe is one point. Like how could you deal with this issue, right? And probably the easiest one is like, as for most things, is you get like fast consensus finality, and you actually get finality. Yeah, but like in systems where you have this kind of forks and like testy behavior where like, everybody builds on stuff which isn't really confirmed, and like today I think we didn't even once mention that okay, a block might be reverted and we have like cross-block MEV opportunities, and like maybe it makes sense to fork a block as an opportunity to extract even more values. Then it really becomes a big issue. And like if everybody does this kind of thing, it gets even worse. Like basically the very short, brief overview of what we did there.
You mentioned that there are.
Well, the first one is like you have like pair block finality. So if you, this like reduces the for normal users, they basically don't have to worry about it anymore. You're doing that in ETH2. Yeah.
Close block finality.
Yeah.
Oh, right. We're asking what is block finality. Or beyond half a person actually working on it.
Oh, that's sad to see actually.
Well, there's more than half a person. I mean, well, I guess there's half a Francesco and there's
that's what
David C's team. But,
oh, okay, fine. There's multiple halves.
But if you have like some more, you have something about it, like a draft or whatever. Like
if you search
it's linked in that.
Yeah.
Single block finality.
Happen to take a closer look. There is another interesting countermeasure. You can use the attack against itself. So you can kind of hedge against if you're a merchant, right? And you're afraid that somebody does this to you, then you like yourself, when you pay some money you received through such a transaction, you just pay again with such a transaction. And you kind of leverage the same kind of attack to protect against it. So there's this kind of recursive use of the thing, which is kind of an interesting strategy as maybe the fun headline in the title of the paper. Yeah. This is like, and like you don't even have to know when it happens. Like you don't even have to recognize it. You don't just if a fork occurs for whatever reason, and like be it like a long range fork issue we have seen in, I don't know, it's in Classic or something, and then you get like all your money back. This is like an amazing thing. For like, yeah, like we have a contract which basically can do this like forwards thing that pipes whatever you want to do through a contract, does exactly that, and like. Yeah. Just like massively, like reorgs for this is like a massive. Yeah. Yeah, it's
like the state, proof of stake by itself, like that, like you have a large fraction of all the validators rework, then like single split, and they kind of put that up further.
Yeah.
Isn't there a patch? Didn't you during the New York saga? Didn't you about the patch?
the one with Giorgio?
Yes.
Well, the one with Giorgio is just like points out that proof of stake, or at least our version of proof of stake takes it harder to do reworks than like our independent. Parallel confirmations.
Could you argue like proof of stake? I mean, validators and proof of stake have an interest in the stable environment.
Right, but like our argument wasn't like a proof of stake versus proof of work thing. It was like Jasper does many parallel things.
The thing is actually it's quite interesting which kind of proof of stake design. So Casper with this kind of slashing is much less. There is much less of a problem. But like in Cardano, for example, they added a feature where you can specify a window where a transaction is valid, and they don't have slashing in the consensus. So there it actually is very easy to implement, and it's like don't have this slashing. You can just It's still kind of a longest chain rule, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they use like the original Ouroboros is like old school, but like they're using a variant of Prowse. Like since Prowse, not much has changed how it works in like.
Closer to the last.
Yeah, definitely.
Tina, you?
Really, want to just. Well, I guess sorry. You have to send me your slides. Can you send me the link, or is it a local file? Telegram. Yes. Oh, you sent it to Telegram. Okay.
What are the constraints you like would consider like a single slot solution? Like, imagine like I don't know, it probably comes with some penalty on like hardware requirements for validators,
So
network bandwidth, or kind of.
It turns out that it's actually not that bad bandwidth-wise. It's interesting. Like I think we realized that we were like basically for Ethereum as it is today, the bottleneck in like scaling to supporting more validators isn't just like elliptic curve verification. It's the aggregation process, and it turns out that like you actually can do the like signature verification going all the way up to like several 100,000 per slot. Aggregation is something that like you'd have to change, but we have ideas for how to optimize it. Yeah. So it could actually be done with relatively few sacrifices. No, but the attestation aggregation. Yeah, aggregate verification is like just one ECAD per participant. Right?
Yeah, you can also just
well,
use
actually,
your finger.
you can knock it down to like a quarter of an ECAD per participant. We will have more cash, like over points.
Cool.
I just quickly tell what we did, but it is the research focused on Bitcoin blockchain and UTXO-based blockchain, and I also told to Tina maybe it's not related to the discussion today, and she just suggested to go through with that, and then we can discuss it with Ethereum or something like that. We did a study based on interviews and questionnaire on user perceived privacy and the mental model of their understanding of privacy issues in Bitcoin and their preferences on privacy preserving techniques implemented by wallets or other privacy coins, and then to see if to answer maybe these main questions, that to what extent they are aware of privacy issues and also the privacy enhancing technologies, and what preferences they have. Do they, for instance, prefer using add-on privacy techniques on top of Bitcoin, or do they prefer using privacy coins? And for this, are they willing to use these privacy preserving techniques despite the higher fees and delays? And also, do they trust privacy preserving third-party services for it? So I will skip most of the slides as I just want to explain the findings.
Oh, somehow it's not great. Sorry, this is another of the screen sharing issue, I think. Yeah, this is sorry about this. No, oh, actually, sorry, you're open. You're not sharing the right. Yeah. Just scroll. There, it's a different screen.
Okay. I skip these fundamentals and basic concepts, but here I just explain the privacy issues in Bitcoin, and I'm going to, and all the attacks over the privacy in Bitcoin. Let's see. Yes, let me show this one. It's an example of CoinJoin transaction, and CoinJoin, as you know, maybe it's one of the main and first proposed techniques to provide privacy, but it has a problem that the equal size output makes it clear for everyone that someone used CoinJoin transaction. And there are some wallets now, Join Market, Wasabi, Samurai, providing these CoinJoin transactions, but they are distinguishable in the blockchain. And yeah, I skip all of them to show just this slide. For the privacy awareness, when we asked users about the questions, we found some interesting point that it was, one of them was lack of knowledge of difference between custodial wallets, such as exchanges, and also non-custodial wallets. And the users were, some of them were even unaware of the privacy issues with using custodial wallets. And also some of them preferred continue using exchanges as they were so easy to play with them actually, and some of them mentioned that recovering the cryptographic keys is more complex than recovering a password for an exchange. So
how many users did you survey?
Actually, for the interview, it was 12 participants, but we run a quantitative study actually with 101 participants. But the main concern was for the interviews with the inequality. And there were also privacy misconception. As an example, one of the users told that Bitcoin is based on encryption algorithm, which makes it anonymous. And then
all of the users are all using.
Yes, they were cryptocurrency users, but they were non-technical users. And for instance, one of the users also told that the user don't know to whom the public key belongs. It's an alphanumeric phrase, and all the identities are hidden in the network. And one of the interesting points was mitigation in case of awareness. As an example, one of the users, at the end of the interview, one of them told that I have never heard about these privacy issues. But if I knew about them, I would have researched possible solutions to mitigate them. And when we asked about some well-renowned attacks over Bitcoin, address reuse and information from exchange have increased attention, and most of the users have heard about these attacks. And also, maybe we can say that it was the power of education by wallets. For instance, when they suggest to make a new address every time, then most of them knew that they should prevent reusing the address. But one of the interesting things was that most of them have never heard about common input ownership heuristic in Bitcoin when it's the first heuristic in the privacy attacks that consider all the inputs to the transactions belong to the same user. And also privacy tools was unpopular among non-technical users. They either have never heard about them, or if they have heard Zcash or Monero, they didn't know which kind of privacy is provided by these privacy coins. And also it was distrust of privacy. For instance, one of the users told that I don't want to run away from taxes. I have no reason to be anonymous. So they just thought that using privacy techniques maybe is for tax evasion, for doing criminal activities and something like that. And it was a negative understanding of privacy. And for privacy preferences, when we asked users whether they prefer to use privacy-preserving techniques on top of Bitcoin, or they prefer using privacy coins, more than half of them preferred using privacy coins. And also those who prefer to use add-on techniques, they expected a built-in improvement to the Bitcoin in the future. We also, and users also accepted longer transaction times, but half of them dismissed the idea of paying extra fees to have privacy. And those who were aware of distinguishability of CoinJoin were not willing to use it. They preferred doing ordinary transactions rather than using a privacy-preserving techniques, which is distinguishable in the blockchain.
I think this, like, the longer waiting time, this could be related to NAV. I mean, we could say that you're willing to wait for longer, like you're potentially like more NAV extracted from the transaction, and you're not paying. I mean, it's not related to privacy. Just think that this extreme discount.
The mental model.
Right, like not willing to pay fees, but willing to wait.
And for the privacy wallets, the wallets still struggle to attract more users, as they are still unpopular, at least among non-technical users. And there is also a complexity for using these wallets, and using these wallets needs minimum understanding of privacy concepts. For instance, when you ask someone to do a CoinJoin transaction with one of these wallets, they may really skip some of the, they may fail in some of the tasks. We also did a study for user study on privacy wallets, and some of the users even failed to complete the CoinJoin transactions, for instance, as it was some of the parts were too complicated, and they couldn't understand why they cannot finish the tasks. And I cannot go the next slide.
Cannot go to the next slide?
No, maybe it's...
Oh, no, I think you can... Oh, I think that's the end of your...
No, it's 50 out of 56.
Oh, okay.
Maybe just press the down button.
Yeah, I did that.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things.
So maybe 2 items. I
shared the link already.
Okay.
For everyone.
Yeah. And another item for the privacy wallet was that the government bans and some of the exchanges banned CoinJoin and the output of CoinJoin transactions, and it would be a barrier for using these wallets. And also another interesting fact was that users preferred wallets that support different coins rather than installing a different wallet for their privacy and learning their functions to improve their privacy. And if I want to finish my presentation, some of the problems was little knowledge of privacy issues and privacy enhancing techniques. And privacy techniques were too technical for ordinary users. And there were negative understanding of privacy for criminal activities and also tax evasion. And for the solutions, maybe we can consider education, integration with the wallets or documentation and social media. And we can also consider proposing privacy techniques for, let's say, public privacy rather than, for instance, we can provide privacy on blockchain, but we know that wallets and exchanges have some information about the users, but we can at least keep them private from whole the world.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm curious how that impacts. Well, I ordered a